arm of 55. And what I'm looking at stat-wise, he's 11 for 30 since being called up this year to AAA Iowa. With that would give him a 367 average. Prior to that, at AA, he was 25 at bats and only a 120 average. And he's done all this in 1 year. He's at the rookie league ball for the Cubs to start the year. In 16 at bats, he hit 375. So he is their 11th ranked prospect. You're talking about an Ian Happ, who so far has just not panned out that well for the Cubs, and you're getting an established bat in Mancini. I think I'd do it. I think I'd do it if I'm the Cubs. And it'd be interesting to see how Mancini then would fit in. It would be a fantasy nightmare in that it would certainly, I think, devalue Mancini in fantasy. It would devalue Almora in fantasy if there's anything there. And I think it would probably make Bote, Addison Russell, all of that crew somewhat expendable because you've got to play Chris Bryant every day. And so you're going to either play him at third or you're going to play him in the outfield. And if he's in the outfield, then Mancini just basically isn't playing. So, good point. I like that. I hadn't heard that one. I'm glad you brought that up. If there's any more out there, let me know. And while we're doing that, let me talk about some prospects. Sort of my top 10, not necessarily in order. I've already talked about Urias for the Padres, so I won't talk about him again. I want to talk about Carter Kieboom. Kieboom, I've talked about him some. He's having a really good year at AAA, a 1.022 OPS through 67 AAA games. He was a bust earlier in the year for the Nats. And I told you back in early June when some of you were saying the Nats were out of it, I was like, don't rule the Nats out. The pitching is too good. And I was right. The pitching is too good. Don't rule them out. The problem with Kieboom, of course, is opportunity right now. Trey Turner is going to play shortstop. Kendrick, when he plays, is a force. Dozier's been hitting a little better lately for the Nats, but if somebody slips and falls, count on Kieboom to be up. Chappie sent me a message talking about Lance Lynn. Pretty good pitcher in St. Louis. Yeah, he was. Sucked for the Yankees. And the thing about St. Louis, though, I still saw him excel early and fade late. So, does St. Louis get a pitching arm? St. Louis, to me, they just sort of are out there in a sleep zone right now, Chappie. I don't hear them in any discussion. Kind of scary when you don't hear about a team, right? But I don't hear about them in any discussion. You know they need something. Of course, I've said all along, they need the players they've got to play like the players they've got. I'll say it again. They need the players they have to play like the players they have. A different translation. Matt Carpenter. Golly, how many of you guys have stuck with Matt Carpenter through thick and thin this year? And let me just say, there's not been a lot of thick. There's been a whole lot of thin. Carpenter, 216. So let's talk about Matt Carpenter for a minute as I pause from the prospect look. Is he a 216 hitter? Is he a 230 hitter? Is he a 250 hitter? Is he a 270 hitter? Let's say you take the position that Matt Carpenter is a 270 hitter. And through 90-some games, over half the schedule, he's hit 216. Which would be about, 55 points below 270. Which would mean to equal it out, he'd have to hit about 60 points above 270 in the second half. 330 in the second half. If he finishes the year around 270. What do you think? Is he that kind of player still? He certainly hasn't been so far this year. I mean, so far this year, nothing. Now, he did resume baseball activities on Saturday, according to Aaron Rodgers of MLB. He hit manager Mike, I can't pronounce his name too well, I'm sorry, Schlilt, said that he had positive overall performance. Carpenter has previously said he expects to be ready to return to action when first eligible July 12. So there's Matt Carpenter. Now, he's been one underperformer. There are others we can talk about for St. Louis. How about Paul Goldschmidt? 254 average, 16 homers, 37 RBIs. But I think what's interesting is heading into the All-Star break, 6 games prior to the All-Star break, 20 at-bats, and 8 hits. A 400 average heading into the All-Star break over the last 6 games with 2 home runs and 6 RBIs. And that's more Paul Goldschmidt-ish, isn't it? Positive signs there. How about Paul DeJong? And boy, I mean, this guy, oh, come on. I hear, there's this guy on Sirius XM radio. I probably shouldn't say that, but he's on in the mornings. It's a guy called Real Talk Raf, and he just talks about in April how great Paul DeJong is. He does it every year. And every April, Paul DeJong is really good. But every May and June, he really sucks. That's the only way I know to say it. I mean, I have no confidence in DeJong. He is hitting 258. He is at 13 home runs, 36 RBIs. You talk about a hot and cold hitter, but if DeJong could get hot, that's a big if. Ozuna. When's he coming back? He's on the IL. He's continuing rehab in St. Louis, having problems with his fingers. There's no timeline on his recovery. The manager, Schilt, has said Ozuna will need to have full strength back in his injured middle and ring fingers before activation because he just can't grip the bat. Now, that's concerning to me when a slugger like Marcell Ozuna can't grip the bat. And I think for St. Louis to have a second half run in them, these 4 players, Goldschmidt, Ozuna, DeJong, and Carpenter, have got to be a big part of the improvement, both in their individual games and in the team-winning concept game. So let's keep our eye on those 4 players. And then for fantasy, are they worth either adding, trading for, or should you trade them away? What value, if you had a dollar bill and you're talking about cents on the dollar, can you get dollar for Paul DeJong for where you drafted him early in the year? Probably not. 90 cents? Maybe. Ozuna, often injured, and he still has that sore shoulder, dark cloud hanging over him. DeJong, streaky. Carpenter, 216. Trade for, trade away. Bet on improvement, bet on continued mediocre play. And that's what you have to do as a fantasy owner. That's how leagues are won and lost. Let's say you pick up a Carpenter and he goes off. Let's say you trade away a Carpenter and he goes off. Versus you pick up a Carpenter and he continues to hit 216. No risk, no reward, right? That's the way it goes. Talk about some more prospects. I'm still looking into the chat room. Give me some more. I'm ready. Chappie just texted me. Greinke for DeJong. Cents on the dollar. My question would be, if you're a Greinke owner, do you trade him for Paul DeJong? If I'm a DeJong owner, I trade him for Greinke. Yeah. Greinke, 10-3. His last start home against Colorado, 7 innings, 9 strikeouts, 108 strikeouts on the year, 2.73 ERA, 0.92 whip. Did not participate in the All-Star game due to some type of personal matter. Don't know what that is. That's reported by Richard Morin of the Arizona Republic. Torey Lovello said Greinke's absence likely will shake up the rotation for the road series against St. Louis that begins tomorrow. He's not divulged the order. Greinke was tentatively expected to start the series. So I guess your question with Greinke is, what's up? When's he going to play? And if you make that trade and you're a DeJong older for Greinke, you take the risk that Greinke may have issues again. Remember, he had emotional issues a few years ago and missed up like a whole season. Hopefully that's not going on. But the fact that we don't know what's up, the lack of divulging of information. So go back to Chappie's question, do you trade DeJong for Greinke? You have some risk both ways, right? I'll tell you a player I like in the second half for Arizona, though, is Robbie Ray. I really do. I know he's wild as a buck, but he's going to get traded, in my opinion. He strikes out people. Here's a great, okay. The Yankees are talking about a pitcher. Go get Robbie Ray. Yeah, he only pitches 6 innings a game, but that's all you need if you're the Yankees. You got that bullpen, right? He strikes out double-digit guys, and that left-handed power arm in Yankee Stadium is exactly what you need while we're talking about Diamondback pitchers. And so if I'm the New York Yankees, I'm all over me some Robbie Ray. Prospects, Kyle Tucker, talked about him briefly. Probably right now, as far as potential for the major leagues, one of the top players at AAA. He's hitting okay, but he's cooled off a bit. He had 33 strikeouts in 25 June games. He hasn't hit a home run or stolen a base in July. He has hit 24 home runs in 81 games, and he does have a strong OPS at 941. Now, the Astros have talked publicly about not trading him, but I think privately they're ready to press the button. Bo Bichette, Blue Jays. What much more can he do at AAA? He's now hitting 335 in AAA. But he's got Freddie Galvis in front of him in Toronto. And I think as long as Freddie Galvis is hitting like he has so far this year, you don't see Bo Bichette. You let Freddie Galvis cool down, and then you probably see Bo Bichette in Toronto. Don't you think? And I'm talking about Freddie Galvis. I mean, this is Freddie stinking Galvis, okay? He's hitting 273. And in the year of the home run, he's got 15 home runs and 44 RBIs. Freddie Galvis, are you kidding me? And is there any more proof you need that the ball is wound tight this year? But as long as he hits, and I'm looking at his last several games, 1 for 4, 3 for 3, 2 for 5, 1 for 4. He did have an 0 for 4, and then his last game against Baltimore before the break, 1 for 3. I don't know if there's a team that wants to trade for Freddie Galvis. Maybe he's thrown in a 2 for 2 if Stroman goes somewhere. And at the moment you see Freddie Galvis being traded, if that happens, Bo Bichette gets called up. The danger you have is if Freddie Galvis doesn't get traded this year, Bichette may not come up until 2020. The great thing about baseball, right? Will Smith for the Dodgers, AAA. Outstanding year at AAA, 344, 6 home runs. He's a catcher. The Dodgers have another catching prospect down on the farm. And I mention Will Smith, first of all, because here is a trade chip. Okay, they've got Lux, who's a shortstop. I've just mentioned Will Smith, but they have a better catcher, in my opinion, Keibert Ruiz, who I think is better than Will Smith. He's at AA. And so Will Smith with the 344 average and the 675 OPS could very well be a trade bait in the Dodgers looking for a Will Smith, looking for another bullpen arm. Jordan Romano for the Blue Jays. You know, Ken Giles is on the block. They're probably going to trade him. So here goes Romano, who's at AAA, throws the ball really well. Look for him in Toronto before the trade deadline. And he could be a source of saves for the rest of the year. Write that name down, Jordan Romano, Toronto Blue Jays.